The chamber was silent, not the comfortable silence of meditation or the peaceful quiet of a sleeping world. This was the silence of 1,000 species holding their breath, waiting for words that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of right and wrong. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the center of the Convergence Hall, a cylindrical chamber so vast that its ceiling disappeared into an artificial twilight. Around her, rising in concentric circles like an inverted amphitheater, sat the representatives of 417 civilizations. Some had faces, others were clouds of sentient gas contained in crystalline matrices. A few were simply points of light, their consciousness broadcast across light years to participate in this most unprecedented of trials. She did not wear her uniform. The Galactic Council had requested she appear as herself, not as a soldier. But Sarah Chen had been a soldier for 32 years, and she wasn't sure who she was without the uniform anymore. So she stood in simple gray clothing, her hands clasped behind her back in parade rest, a habit she couldn't break. At the highest point of the chamber, the Arbiter presided. The Arbiter was not a single being but a consensus entity. 9 ancient civilizations merged into one deliberative consciousness. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, each word carefully weighted with the moral authority of species that had transcended war millennia ago. Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth, the Arbiter's voice resonated through the chamber. You stand before this council not as a criminal, but as a representative of your species. We seek understanding, not vengeance. Tell us, why did humanity do what it did? Sarah looked up at the rings of alien faces, alien forms, alien minds that could never fully comprehend what it meant to be human, to be fragile, to be alone in the dark. But she had to try. 3 years ago, she began, her voice steady, amplified by the chamber's acoustic perfection. We detected the first Xylos scout ships at the edge of our solar system. We didn't know who they were. We didn't know what they wanted. We sent messages in every language, every mathematical sequence, every conceivable form of communication we could devise. She paused, the memory still raw despite the time that had passed. They answered with weapons fire. 23 research stations destroyed in the first hour. 40,000 colonists on Mars, dead. The lunar colonies, gone. They didn't want our resources. They didn't want our surrender. They wanted extermination, pure and simple. And we learned why. A hologram materialized in the center of the chamber, pulled from Earth's military archives. It showed the translated Xylos battle doctrine, recovered from the wreckage of their command ship. Sarah didn't need to read it. She had memorized every word during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come. To the Xylos, she continued, we were Predator Species Designation 774. Our evolutionary history, our emergence from prey and predator dynamics, marked us as dangerous. Their doctrine stated that any predator-evolved species must be eliminated before achieving interstellar capability. They had exterminated 42 civilizations under this doctrine. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Some species knew this. Others were hearing it for the first time. We fought, Sarah said simply. For 2 years, we fought with everything we had. Our ships were inferior. Our weapons were primitive compared to theirs. But we learned fast. We had to. Every battle was an education written in the blood of our soldiers, our civilians, our children. She gestured, and another hologram appeared. Earth, scarred with impact craters, continents burning, oceans boiling in places where Xylos weapons had struck. They reached Earth orbit. We had maybe weeks left before planetary bombardment would make our world uninhabitable. That's when our scientists presented me with the gateway weapon. The chamber's temperature seemed to drop. The gateway weapon was why they were all here. The gateway wasn't a bomb or a missile. It was a breach, a controlled tear into subspace that would create a cascade reaction along the Xylos fleet's quantum communication network. We knew it would work. We also knew it would kill every Xylos in range of their own network. Not just their fleet, not just their military. Everyone. Sarah's hands tightened behind her back, knuckles white with pressure. 2,300,000,000 Xylos lives ended in 47 seconds when I gave the order to activate the gateway. Their homeworld, their colonies, their civilian stations. Everyone connected to their network. We didn't differentiate between soldier and civilian because we couldn't. The weapon didn't allow for that precision. The silence returned, heavier now. So you asked me why we did it. Sarah's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed forward. Because the alternative was the extinction of my entire species. Because every day we delayed meant more human lives lost. Because when you're drowning, you don't ask that a hand pulling you up has clean fingernails. You grab on and you survive. From the council rings, a voice emerged. It belonged to Ambassador Kaelen of the Cytherian Collective, a species that resembled crystalline trees, their thoughts visible as colored light patterns within their transparent bodies. Admiral Chen, the Council understand the position Earth faced, but understanding context does not absolve action. The Xylos civilization existed for 73,000 years. They had art, culture, philosophy, families, children. Your weapon did not distinguish. How do you justify the murder of billions of innocent lives? Sarah turned toward Kaelen's position in the rings. She had expected this question. She had lived with this question every day since she gave the order. I don't, she said quietly. I can't justify it. I can only explain it. We didn't have time to be surgical. We didn't have the luxury of precision. The Xylos military doctrine didn't give us that option. They came to exterminate us, and they were succeeding. If we had hesitated, if we had tried to find a more ethical solution, humanity would not exist to stand trial here today. And that makes it acceptable? This voice was different. A deep rumble that Sarah recognized as belonging to the Vraxian representative, a species that resembled ambulatory mountains of living stone. That survival justifies any action, no matter how heinous? No, Sarah said firmly. It doesn't make it acceptable. It makes it necessary. There's a difference. Explain that difference, the Arbiter commanded. Sarah took a breath. This was the heart of it. The moral razor's edge she had been walking for 3 years. Acceptable implies I'm at peace with what I did, that I sleep soundly, that I believe in some cosmic moral calculus. The scales are balanced. They're not. I carry those 2 billion deaths with me every day. I see their faces in my dreams, faces I imagined because I never actually saw them, but they haunt me anyway. She looked around the vast chamber, meeting as many eyes and eye equivalents as she could. But necessary means that given the same circumstances, the same impossible choice, I would do it again. Because the alternative was the extinction of my species. Because the moral weight of human extinction was heavier than the moral weight of Xylos' extinction. At least in that moment. You can call that species bias. You can call that tribalism. You'd be right, but it's also survival. A new voice joined the debate. This one musical and strange. The representative of the Melodian consciousness, beings who existed as pure sound waves in a crystalline matrix. Admiral Chen, you speak of survival as if it is the ultimate moral good. But is survival at any cost truly survival? If you must become monsters to live, have you truly saved your species, or merely created a hollow shell wearing your species' name? The question hit harder than Sarah expected. It was a question she had asked herself in the dark hours, when the weight of command and the weight of conscience pressed down until she couldn't breathe. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe you're right. Maybe we did become something else when we activated that weapon. Maybe we crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. But I know that right now, there are 7 billion humans alive on Earth and throughout our colonies. There are children being born, lovers meeting for the first time, scientists making discoveries, artists creating beauty. All of that exists because I gave that order, and all of that would be silence and ash if I hadn't. From another section of the chamber, a voice emerged, cold and measured. The Talvarian Dominion, a civilization known for its strict adherence to interstellar law. The question before this council is not whether humanity had the right to defend itself. That right is inalienable and recognized by all civilized species. The question is whether humanity's response exceeded the bounds of proportional defense. The Xylos fleet numbered approximately 400,000 military personnel. Your weapon killed 2 billion, 300 million beings. That is a ratio of nearly 6,000 to 1. How is that proportional? Sarah had prepared for this argument too. She had prepared for all of them, spending months with legal scholars ethicists, military strategists, trying to build a defense that wouldn't sound like mere rationalization. Because proportionality assumes symmetric warfare, she said. The Xylos weren't trying to conquer us. They weren't trying to subjugate us or steal our resources. They were trying to make us extinct. Every single Xylos, civilian or military, accepted that goal as righteous according to their cultural doctrine. Their children were raised to believe that species like us, predator-evolved species, were existential threats that must be eliminated. She pulled up another hologram, this one showing Xylos education materials recovered from their databanks. This is from a Xylos primary education program. It teaches children, equivalent to our 6-year-olds, that predator species are corruption in the cosmic order and that the pure have a duty to cleanse the galaxy. This wasn't just their military policy. This was their civilization's fundamental principle. Sarah's voice grew harder. So when you ask about proportionality, you're asking the wrong question. The right question is, how do you proportionally respond to someone trying to commit genocide against your entire species? What's the proportional response to extermination? Because from where I was standing, with Earth burning and our population dying by the millions, the proportional response was whatever it took to stop them. Ambassador Kaelen's colors shifted to deep blue, a sign of deep concern in Cytherian communication. But Admiral, by that logic, any species facing extinction could justify any atrocity. The Xylos could have made the same argument you're making now. They believed you were an existential threat to the galaxy. They were acting to prevent what they saw as a future catastrophe. Then they were wrong, Sarah said flatly. We weren't trying to exterminate anyone. We hadn't attacked anyone. We were barely off our own world when they found us. Their belief didn't make their actions justified. It made them murderers on a cosmic scale. And what does your action make you? Kaelen asked softly. Sarah met the crystalline being's gaze. A murderer on an even larger scale. I know that. I accept that. But I'm a murderer who saved 7 billion lives. The Xylos were murderers who destroyed 42 civilizations before they came for us. There's a moral difference there, even if it's uncomfortable to admit. The Arbiter's voice resonated again. The Council recognizes the philosophical complexity of the situation. Let us hear from other perspectives. Ambassador Kaelen, you were present during the final days of the conflict. You witnessed both human desperation and Xylos aggression. What is your assessment? Kaelen's form shimmered as they gathered their thoughts, colors dancing through their crystalline structure like aurora borealis through ice. I arrived in the Sol system as an observer, Kaelen began, sent by the collective to assess whether intervention was warranted under protection of emergent species protocols. What I found was carnage beyond my comprehension. I had studied war, but I had never witnessed it. My species transcended violent conflict 17,000 years ago. Kaelen's color shifted to dark red, the Cytherian expression of profound distress. The Xylos were efficient, terrifyingly so. They had refined genocide into an art form over thousands of years. I watched them destroy a human evacuation convoy, civilian ships marked with rescue insignia, broadcasting surrender codes. The Xylos destroyed them anyway because their doctrine didn't recognize surrender from predator species. They believed allowing any humans to escape was moral failure. The crystalline ambassador paused, and Sarah could see the trauma of those memories reflected in the dimming of their inner light. Then I witnessed the humans fight back. And I confess I was horrified by them too. They were so young, so primitive in many ways, yet so creative in violence. They weaponized asteroids. They turned their own colony ships into kinetic missiles. I watched the human Captain ram his crippled vessel into a Xylos dreadnought, killing himself and 3,000 crew members to buy time for an evacuation. Kaelen's color shifted again, this time to a complex pattern Sarah had learned meant deep moral confusion. When Admiral Chen activated the gateway weapon, I was in orbit above Earth. I felt the pulse travel through subspace. I knew what it meant. And I confessed to this council that my first emotion was relief. Relief that the slaughter would stop. Relief that this young species would survive. It was only later, when I learned the full scope of the Xylos' deaths, that horror set in. So what is your judgment? The Arbiter asked. Did humanity act with justice or with excess? Kaelen's color stilled, settling into a steady white, the Cytherian expression of difficult truth. Both, Kaelen said. And neither. Humanity acted with survival instinct against an enemy that gave them no choice. But they also wielded power beyond wisdom, beyond mercy. They became what they feared the Xylos saw them as, predators willing to kill on a massive scale. The tragedy is that the Xylos created the very monster they claimed humans would become. From the council rings, a harsh sound emerged. The Kryn representative, a species resembling armored centipedes that communicated through clicking mandibles translated by the chamber systems. This council grows soft, the Kryn stated. Humanity faced extermination. They responded with overwhelming force. This is correct behavior. The weak perish. The strong survive. This is natural law. Why do we waste time debating what is obvious? Several council members responded at once, a cacophony of objection that the arbiter had to quiet. Because civilization, came a gentle voice that somehow cut through the noise, is defined by our willingness to question natural law. The speaker was Elder Tom, representative of the Ancients, a collective of the first 5 species to achieve interstellar travel, now so advanced they rarely involved themselves in galactic affairs. When they spoke, everyone listened. The Kryn are correct that from a purely survivalist perspective, humanity's action was logical, Elder Tom continued. But we do not gather in this council to celebrate logic. We gather to transcend it. The question before us is not whether humanity survived, but whether their method of survival is compatible with their membership in a civilized galactic community. Sarah felt her chest tighten. This was a real judgment, not whether she would be punished, but whether humanity would be isolated, quarantined, marked as too dangerous to join the wider galaxy. Elder Tom, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear, I understand the Council's concern, but I ask you this. How many of your species are here today because at some point in your history you made the same impossible choice? How many of you survived an existential threat by doing something you're not proud of? She gestured to the assembled representatives. I've studied your histories. The Cytherians exterminated the Silicon Plague by destroying 17 star systems, including those with colonies of your own people. The Vraxians survived the Hunger Wars by cannibalizing your own kind until your biology adapted. The Melodians absorbed the consciousness of the dissonant collective against their will to prevent war. Every species in this chamber has blood in its past. Those events occurred before we joined the galactic community. The Talvarian representative objected. Before we accepted the common law that governs civilized species. Humanity's action occurred after we extended contact, after you knew the rules. We knew the rules, Sarah agreed, but we also knew that following those rules meant extinction. The Galactic Council's response time was weeks. We had days. You can't ask a species to die politely to preserve your legal framework. Elder Tom spoke again. Admiral Chen raises a valid point. The question of timing is significant. However, there remains the question of alternatives. Your scientists developed the gateway weapon. Surely they considered other options. Sarah nodded slowly. This was the hardest part to explain. We considered everything. Targeted strikes against Xylos command ships. They decentralized within hours. Diplomatic overtures. They ignored them all. Retreat to deep space. They would have hunted us down. Surrender. They didn't accept it. The gateway weapon was not our first choice. It was our only choice that guaranteed survival. Guaranteed at the cost of billions. Ambassador Kaelen said quietly. Yes, Sarah said, and I will carry that cost until I die. But I will carry it living, not as I scattered across space. The debate continued for hours. Species after species offered their perspective, their judgment, their philosophical framework for understanding the moral weight of what humanity had done. Some argued for humanity's actions as justified self-defense. Others called for humanity to be quarantined, isolated from galactic civilization until they evolved beyond their violent nature. A few, like the Kryn, argued that humanity had simply demonstrated the strength necessary to survive and should be welcomed. But through it all, Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, answering questions, defending her choice, never once claiming it was right, only that it was necessary. Finally, as the chamber's artificial daylight began to dim toward evening, the Arbiter spoke again. This council will now deliberate. Admiral Chen, you will be given one final opportunity to speak, not to defend your actions, but to tell us, what has humanity learned from this experience? What will you carry forward into the galaxy? Sarah had known this question was coming. It was the question that mattered more than all the others, because it wasn't about the past. It was about the future. She took a breath and looked around the chamber one last time before speaking. We learned that we are capable of terrible things. We learned that when pushed to the edge, when faced with extinction, we will do whatever it takes to survive. And that terrifies us. She paused, letting the weight of that admission settle. But we also learned that survival isn't enough. Living with what we've done, that's harder than dying would have been. Every human knows what we did to the Xylos. We don't hide from it. We teach it in schools. We debate it in our assemblies. We mourn those 2 billion lives alongside our own dead. Sarah's voice grew stronger. What we carry forward is a commitment to never face that choice again. Not because we regret surviving. We don't. But because we regret the price. We're investing everything in diplomatic protocols, in early warning systems, in alliance building, in anything that might prevent another species from putting us in that position. Because we never want to become what we had to become to survive. She looked directly up at where the Arbiter presided. We're not asking you to forgive us. We're not asking you to forget. We're asking you to let us prove that we can be more than the worst thing we've ever done. We're asking for the chance to show that survival instinct and moral growth aren't mutually exclusive. We're asking to join the galactic community not in spite of what we did, but with a full knowledge of what we're capable of and a commitment to never do it again. The chamber fell silent again. Then the Arbiter spoke. The council will deliberate. Admiral Sarah Chen, you are dismissed. Sarah gave a crisp nod, old military habits, and turned to walk toward the chamber's exit. Her legs felt weak. She had said everything she could say, done everything she could do. Now humanity's fate was in the hands of beings who might never truly understand what it meant to face extinction. As she reached the doorway, Ambassador Kaelen's voice stopped her. Admiral? Sarah turned back. Kaelen's crystalline form shimmered with colors Sarah had never seen before, a pattern the translator couldn't interpret. For what it's worth, Kaelen said, I believe you. I believe that humanity can be more. I will argue for that in deliberation. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. But Admiral, Kaelen added, colors shifting to deep blue again, I also believe you created a precedent that will haunt the galaxy for millennia. Other species, facing other threats, will remember what humanity did. They will cite your example. They will say, if humans can do it to survive, so can we. What you did to save your species may lead to the deaths of countless others in the future. Sarah felt the words like a physical blow, because Kaelen was right. She had thought about it during countless sleepless nights. The gateway weapon wasn't just a tool. It was a proof of concept, a demonstration that overwhelming force could solve unsolvable problems. I know, Sarah said, and that's another weight I carry. But Kaelen, what else could I have done? The crystalline being's colors dimmed. I don't know, Sarah, and that is perhaps the most horrifying thing of all. I don't know. Sarah nodded and left the chamber. Outside, in the corridors of the council station, she found the rest of humanity's delegation waiting. Diplomats, scientists, military personnel, all of them part of the team that had prepared for this day. They looked at her with expressions ranging from hope to fear. How did it go? Asked Dr. Marcus Webb, the physicist who had designed the gateway weapon. He looked older than his years, gray-haired and haunted. He had refused to attend the trial, unable to face the judgment of the species whose deaths his invention had caused. I said what we agreed I'd say, Sarah replied. I told the truth. I defended our necessity. I promised we'd be better. Now we wait. How long? Asked Ambassador Park, humanity's chief diplomat. However long it takes, Sarah said. Could be hours. Could be days. And if they rule against us? Park asked quietly. If they vote for quarantine or worse? Sarah looked at the assembled humans, her people, the people she had saved by crossing the line that civilized species weren't supposed to cross. Then we prove them wrong, however long it takes. The wait lasted 3 days. 3 days during which Sarah slept poorly, ate little, and repeatedly walked through the station's observation decks, staring out at the stars and wondering which ones would be closed to humanity forever. On the morning of the 4th day, she was summoned back to the Convergence Hall. The chamber was full again, all 417 species present. Sarah walked to the center, back straight, hands clasped behind her back. She had worn her uniform this time. If they were going to judge humanity, she wanted them to see the uniform of the person who had made the choice, who had carried the burden. The Arbiter's voice filled the chamber. The Galactic Council has deliberated on a matter of Earth's retaliatory action against the Xylos species. We have considered testimony, evidence, historical precedent, and philosophical principle. We have debated the nature of justice, the limits of self-defense, and the requirements of civilization. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might be visible through her uniform. Our judgment is as follows. The action taken by humanity through Admiral Sarah Chen was neither wholly justified nor wholly criminal. It existed in a moral space that our laws were not designed to address, the space of existential threat where survival and ethics come into irreconcilable conflict. The Arbiter paused, and Sarah wondered if even a consciousness like that could feel the weight of such a judgment. Therefore, we rule that humanity shall not be punished for its actions against the Xylos. However, neither shall humanity be fully absolved. Humanity shall be accepted as a probationary member of the Galactic Council with the following conditions. Sarah's breath caught. Probationary membership. It wasn't exile. It wasn't isolation. It was a chance. First, humanity shall submit to a period of guided integration lasting no less than 5 standard galactic cycles. During this time, human expansion shall be monitored and limited. Second, humanity shall establish a memorial initiative dedicated to preserving the memory of the Xylos civilization and the other 42 species they destroyed. This memorial shall serve as a reminder of the cost of fear and the consequences of violence. Third, humanity shall contribute to the development of new galactic protocols for addressing existential threats, ensuring that no species in the future faces the impossible choice Earth faced. Fourth, the gateway, weapon, and all information relating to its creation shall be sealed under Galactic Council authority. No species, including humanity, shall have access to this technology without unanimous council approval. The Arbiter's voice softened slightly. Admiral Sarah Chen, you asked this council to let humanity prove it can be more than the worst thing it has done. We grant you that opportunity. But understand, the galaxy will be watching. Humanity's actions in the coming cycles will determine whether this judgment was wise or foolish. Sarah felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, but she held them back. Thank you, she said, her voice rough with emotion. On behalf of humanity, I accept these terms. We will prove worthy of this chance. We hope you will, the Arbiter said, because the alternative is a galaxy where survival justifies anything. And that is a galaxy none of us should want to inhabit. The chamber erupted in sound, clicks, whistles, musical tones, sound that had no human equivalent, as 417 species reacted to the judgment, some in approval, some in protest, all of them knowing they had just witnessed a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. Sarah stood in the center of it all, feeling the weight lift slightly from her shoulders. Not entirely. It would never lift entirely. She would carry those 2 billion deaths until her own death came. But now she would carry them forward into a future where humanity wasn't alone, where they could learn from species who had walked this path before, where maybe, just maybe, no other species would ever have to make the choice she made. As she left the chamber for the final time, Ambassador Kaelen waited by the door. Congratulations, Admiral, the crystalline being said, colors shifting to bright gold, the Cytherian expression of hope. Thank you, Sarah said. And Kaelen, thank you for believing we could be more. Don't thank me yet, Kaelen replied, colors muting slightly. Now you have to actually be more. That's the hard part. I know, Sarah said. She looked back at the chamber, then forward toward the future. But we're good at doing hard things. We've proven that, at least. As she walked away, she pulled out her personal communicator and sent a message to Earth, to the billions waiting to hear the verdict. We have our chance. Let's not waste it. Behind her, in the convergence hall, the Galactic Council moved on to other business, other debates, other impossible questions. But for the first time in recorded history, they did so with humanity present. Not as observers, not as criminals, but as members. Flawed members. Dangerous members. Members who had crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. But members nonetheless. And in the corridors of the station, in the diplomatic channels that now included human representatives, in the memorial initiatives that would honor the dead of species, both human and Xylos, in the protocols that would try to ensure no species face that choice again, in all of these things, humanity began the long, difficult work of proving that survival and civilization could coexist, that you could do the necessary evil and still choose to be good afterward, that the worst thing you've done doesn't have to be the last thing you do. Admiral Sarah Chen retired from military service 2 years later. She spent the rest of her life working at the Memorial Initiative, telling the stories of the Xylos, learning about the 42 species they had destroyed, and teaching young humans about the cost of survival. When she died at the age of 84, her last words were recorded for the memorial. I saved humanity. I murdered billions. Both truths exist together. Learn from both. The galaxy did. And slowly, painfully, civilization grew a little wiser about the space between survival and ethics, between necessity and excess, between the terrible choices species make and the kind of future they choose afterward. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. But it was progress. And sometimes that's enough.